Good morning, everyone. My name is Rita Gallardo, and I'm the Division Chief for the Office of Stakeholder Relations. On behalf of CalPERS and CalSTRS, I'd like to welcome you to the fall edition of the School Employer Advisory Committee meeting. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here in person, as well as the teleconference, to hear the updates and services and programs and the policies related to the district's work with CalSTRS and CalPERS. A few housekeeping items I'd like to remind you about, and then we'll dive right into our agenda. The first half of the day of the SEAC meeting will be hosted by CalPERS, and then we'll break for lunch. This afternoon session will be hosted by CalSTRS. Those of you here in person should have received copies of your agenda and PowerPoint presentations when you checked in. If not, if you haven't checked in yet, please make sure to do that before you leave today. As always, please request the microphone by raising your hand if you have any comments or questions, as your voice will not be picked up by the webcast going out to our many of the peers across the state that are listening via teleconference. And so Sunshine and David will be running mics today for those of you who have questions. And so if Sunshine and David could wave, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. There they are. And if you're joining us remotely today and you have any questions, please feel free to email us at our email address of CalPERS_SEAC, SEAC, at calpers.ca.gov, and we'll read your questions aloud to the group. And so as we get started, I'd like to bring to your attention that unfortunately our actuarial office was not able to attend today's meeting. They did, however, ask that I share an update with you regarding reasons for changes in employer contributions for the school's pool. I will not be able to take any verbal questions on this topic since nobody here is from our actuarial office to be able to help us with answers. But if you do have a question, please feel free to email us at our email box at the CalPERS_SEAC at calpers.ca.gov email address, and we'll get right back to you. It's important that you get the information that you need in order to make your decisions and have that available to you. So you'll have to forgive me for a moment because there's a lot of detailed information, so I'm going to go ahead and read it, and we'll start with the first chart. Overall, the required contributions for the school's pool have increased by $111 million between fiscal year 2014 and 2015 and fiscal year 2015-2016 to approximately $1,338 million. Please note that the payroll used to calculate the expected dollar contributions is the payroll used in the evaluation incorporating 2 years of payroll growth using the payroll growth assumption of 3%. On April 7th, 2013, the CalPERS Board of Administration approved a change to the CalPERS amortization and smoothing policies. Prior to this change, CalPERS employed an amortization and smoothing policy which spread investments return over a 15-year period, while experiencing gains and losses were amortized over a rolling 30-year period. Effective with this valuation, CalPERS no longer uses an actuarial value of assets and employs an amortization and smoothing policy that spreads rate increases or decreases over a 5-year period and amortizes all experienced gains and losses over a fixed 30-year period. The increase in contributions used by this change has been partially offset by strong investment returns during our fiscal year 2013-14. The Public Employees Pension Reform Act of 2013, better known as PEPRA, requires new benefits for new members as defined by PEPRA that are hired after January 1st, 2013. The normal cost is lowered than in the prior year due to the enrollment of new hires into the lower benefit level. Payroll for fiscal year 2013-14 has increased by 8% due to an increase in active counts and individual salary increases. As a result, required contributions are increasing by almost $70 million. This is the single largest factor towards the expected contribution increase. And we'll move to chart 2. I'm sorry. Thank you. PEPRA member contribution rates. For the year 15-16, the total normal cost for schools' PEPRA members is 12% and does not trigger a member rate change, leaving PEPRA employee contribution rates at 6%. Had the new actuarial assumptions been implemented in the current valuation, the school's PEPRA normal cost would have been 12.68%. This also would not have triggered a member rate change. Expected future changes include the new actuarial assumptions will be reflected in the school's pool in the June 30th, 2015 valuation. The increase in liability due to the new assumptions will be amortized over 20 years and phased in over 5 years, beginning with the contribution requirement for fiscal year 2016-17. The projected impact of the assumption change on the school year's rate in year 1 is estimated to be 1.5% of payroll, and in year 5 estimated to be 4.5% of payroll. In total, the projected impact of all known amortization bases will result in an estimated rate increase of 1.2% in fiscal year 2016-17 and should peak at 5.6% in fiscal year 2021. It is expected to no longer increase. I know this information was quite detailed. I'd like to be able to send it to you via our distribution so that you can have it for your notes as well. So I'll make sure that we share that with you. Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and get started with our agenda today. If everyone is settled in, I'd like to introduce our speaker for our first topic of the day, a legislative update from Mr. Andrew White. Welcome, Andrew.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, so now I can retell my joke. All right, so good morning. As Rita said, my name is Andrew White. I'm with the Legislative Affairs Division. The state legislature is currently in recess until January, and since it was a very light year for pension-related legislation, I have nothing to really update you on. Of course, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and I will attempt to make this more interesting. So looking to 2016, the CalPERS board will be looking at and considering what proposals to move forward for board-sponsored legislation next year. And so if you're interested in mid-December, the board item will be online, and you can read all the various things that we're going to be doing. Most of it technical and clarifying, but who knows? Maybe we'll throw something super interesting in there. Anyway, so like I said, there really isn't anything to update. It's a very quiet time of the year in terms of the legislature, and it's been a quiet year on pension stuff all around. So if you have any questions, I'm available, and if you think of something later, I'll be sitting over there. So. Okay, thank you.
And so we'll go ahead at this time to the Classic CalPERS membership. I'd like to welcome Cassandra Jameson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm actually not Cassandra. Cassandra's here. I'm Christina Rollins. Cassandra and I are both from the membership management section over at CalPERS. I see a lot of familiar faces, so I'm sure I've talked to a lot of you before. But we're here today to basically just do a little clarification on some issues that have come up regarding PEPRA and Classic status with STRS and CalPERS members. As you guys know, you're all familiar with PEPRA, the Public Employees Pension Reform Act, and how it went into effect in 2013. And from what we've seen, you guys have a pretty clear understanding. But again, we've seen some recurring issues that have come up where you guys still have questions on when somebody should be PEPRA or Classic and breaks in service and so forth. I thought the best thing to do, because Cassandra and I only have 15 minutes, is to kind of go over some scenarios with you that we've seen to get clarification and open it up for questions. So if you guys have questions at the end, specific ones about Classic PEPRA, we can take those. So does that work for everybody, hopefully? Okay. And I kind of going over, we don't have slides. So I'm going to go over the scenarios. If I'm going too fast or you want me to repeat one, let me know. But we have pretty much about five scenarios here that we, again, commonly see between PERS and STRS. And the first one is regarding if an employee from STRS separates from STRS and has a break in service greater than 6 months, and they return to work at a PERS agency. You guys wanted to know would they be considered Classic or PEPRA. In that situation, the employee would be considered a PEPRA member, okay? The only exception to this is if the employee was returning to the same employer, so from a school to another school, then they'd be Classic. That's the only exception to that one. Any questions on that one? Okay. So the second scenario that we see is if an employee is considered Classic with a school employer and moves to a different CalPERS covered school employer greater than 6 months. So there's a break in service greater than 6 months. The member would remain Classic due to the same employer rule, the school to school. You guys are all looking like, oh, we already know. so maybe I'll get to some more complicated ones. And if an employee with a STRS membership date after January 1st, 2013, so after PEPRA took effect, if they move to a CalPERS employer within 6 months and they have no prior membership before that January 1st, 2013 date, the member will be PEPRA with CalPERS. Okay. Okay, and so a member who has refunded, so I saw this one, I think of this specific question a couple of weeks ago. So a member who has refunded or retired, they cannot establish reciprocity. If the employee is not eligible for reciprocity on their appointment date, then they are not eligible to remain Classic under that rule. And again, I'm sure you guys are all familiar, but Government Code Section 7522 was added to the parole that listed all these PEPRA provisions and these changes there. So all of these are under that provision. And so another issue that's been coming up is regarding overlapping service dates, also known as concurrent employment. This is allowed between PERS and STRS when the service is for two separate different appointments. Okay, so those are the common scenarios that we have here that we've seen come up. Do you guys have any questions regarding those or any specific questions for Classic PEPRA? Well, that was easy. Oh, okay, Francis.
We have issues with charter schools because CalPERS was not allowing charter schools to come under CalPERS coverage. We've had several charter schools that had their petition in prior to pension reform, and now CalPERS is telling the charters they can choose a current date to be effective for PERS rather than going back to their original resolution date. But that's harming the employees because those employees technically could be Classic members, but if they're choosing a more current date, that makes them a PEPRA member. So we kind of have issues with that.
Okay. Like, this is a brand new one.
And yeah, because of the nature of the charter schools and how long it took for us to get a path forward on how those work, we're allowing the schools to pick when they wanted to be in there. All we can really do is advise them of the benefits of what it means to be Classic and PEPRA. But we can't really tell them up front like what that date should be. Yes.
But I think this creates a problem for the charter school, and it could present a problem going forward. Nothing the charter school has in place allows them or identifies a more current date. Mm-hmm. Their petition, their resolution, everything is dated in the past. And unless CalPERS requires an updated, at the very least, resolution, there's nothing to support a current date.
Okay.
And so I believe going down the road, employees at some point are going to have an issue with that, and potentially the charter schools could be held liable for arrears contributions because they did not enroll them timely if their resolution was a prior date.
Okay. That's a good point. If you have, if you could you send me an email with some of those employers and we can talk about it a little bit more offline? All right.
Hi, this is Veena from Orange County. Regarding the charter school, I just wanted to clarify the way I understand once the charter school submits the paperwork for your approval, even though their resolution is prior to 1/1/13, everything is based on your approval date. So let's say you approved a charter after, let's say in 2015. So isn't it their membership date will be after? Yeah, I turned it off. Didn't do a good job. Isn't it that the membership date will be based, because that's when we are supposed to take the contributions after your approval date, and that's when their membership date will be? I'm trying to clarify. That's the way I understood.
Yeah, that would be correct. The membership date would be the effective date the charter school started. If they were brand new employees, obviously.
if
If they were
they're brand
classic
new.
before, though,
Yeah.
they're still entitled to classic because they're part of the county office's contract.
Right.
Because the charters aren't really truly
And-
contracting with us; they're getting set up as a division.
Right. So based on that date at that time, then we will see whether they were prior to 1/1/13 or
Right,
something.
correct.
What their status is. But normally that's how it will flow, right?
That is correct.
I just wanted to verify.
Yes, you're 100% correct on that.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and we'll go back to the office and talk about some of these issues as well, and maybe we can provide a better path forward. It's been kind of one of those situations where we just recently came to a resolution on how charters can come into the system a little more clearly by filling out that certification form. So we're still working out the details on that. So I'll get back to all of you as well on the proper way to set those up going forward.
Hi, I just wanted to get a little clarification on the Pepra versus Classic. For somebody who was a Classic member, let's say in 1998, and then they separated, they didn't work for 10 years, they were not vested, and then they come back to the same, like a schools to schools. So regardless of the fact that they had the 6-month break, the fact that they were not vested, they still can be a Classic member? Because it's schools to schools.
That's correct. They can still be a Any other questions?
Hold on.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the question was, is it similar from state to state? And correct.
Okay.
It's considered the same employer, therefore they can retain their classic membership.
Cassandra will be here through the break, so if you guys have any more questions or even any membership-related questions, we'll be here through the break, so come see us. Thank you, guys. Oh, hey, sorry, Vina.
Veena from Orange County. It might be for you, I'm just checking. You know, when you guys transferred to the new system in 2011, when you moved from the, originally your system prior to 2011 only had a hire date and membership date, right? There was no original hire date in your system, was there?
Mm-hmm.
There was, or there wasn't?
In one of our multiple systems, yes, we did have the original.
No, now
hire
you
date.
do.
Yes.
So I wanted to know, how did you populate that date when you moved to the new system? How was that field populated?
Yeah, it was converted over. So when
From
whoever
the
was in
higher
the old
date?
system, so from our old systems, it was converted over to the new system when whatever
But
information
I
was in our
thought you
legacy
used
system.
to have 2 dates, and now you have 3 dates, hire date, original hire date, and member date. I'm just not sure how it was populated because somehow between our system, part of it is our fault, and PERS system, those dates are creating a lot of arrears letters for us, like missing payroll and all.
Like incorrectly? I'm sorry, I'm looking over at Tim, the CalPERS expert.
Oh, there you are.
So prior, I believe in our comment system, our old system before we converted the data over to CalPERS, we did provide the original hire date along with the enrollment eligibility date. That's what everybody submitted to us. Membership date was driven data based on their qualifications for membership, and that can be with you or any other employer that they may have been a member for. So that's a derived date, but the other two dates we should have had, and when we convert the data over, it would have pulled whatever was initially provided on the AESD1 form.
Okay, somehow I have to look at the old form because there are lots of discrepancies in our system and your system with the dates problem, original hire date.
So
and
yeah,
I wanted to see.
You'd have to give me specific examples, but I mean, most of that stuff would have come over prior to conversion. Now, some of it, if it's before 1986, I mean, that's when we had even an older system. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's on a case-by-case basis, but most of that information would have been derived from the OAESD1 form and then converted over when we made the conversion from our Comet system to our new MyCalPERS system.
Is it possible we can match our system with
We've already done that
correct-
once with you.
Yeah, it didn't work right on the dates, on the original hire date. We didn't do that piece because we didn't know we will start receiving all these letters from PERS.
You have to email me.
Because your printer works really good. It's sending letters right and left.
So I don't want to take too much time from here, Vina. We've already done a reconciliation process with you before, and we can follow those same steps we did before where you and Gary can provide us what you want. We'll look at the data, try to give you a data extract. You'll have to sign some security agreements for us to send you the data, and then work with your internal source system and your IT resources to figure out where we're going wrong.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's us too.
Yep.
We are partners in it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, are there any more PERS membership questions? Okay.
Good morning. Anna Lambert from Riverside County Office. I'm not sure if it will be more of a STIRS question, but let's say you have a CalPERS Classic member who stops performing classified work but takes a sub position as a certificated, does not automatically qualify for STIRS membership, it's just a sub. And they just took this position to 2015. Would that, if they signed the permissive election 350 form, would they be considered PEPRA or 2% at 60 classic membership since they were performing service within the 6 months?
Would they be PEPRA under STIRS?
Under STIRS.
I am unable to answer that. Yeah.
Okay.
I can
Because
only
it's STIRS.
answer CalPERS.
Then my STIRS question.
Unfortunately. Sorry.
Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you guys for your time. Again, we'll be here if you have any membership questions till the end of the break. Thanks.
Very good. So we are having some technical problems at this time with the email address that I provided. And so I'd like to go ahead and go to the next special compensation item, and then we'll take a break to see if hopefully it gets fixed between now and then. Thank you so much.
I'm sure you remember me from the forum. I see a lot of you. We're there at the forum. All right, so I'm Lolita Luaris. I'm a manager within the Compensation Review Unit, and I'm here today to talk to you about reportable special compensation. We'll go over what that means for Classic members, and we'll go into what it means for your PEPRA members. So there are statutes and regulations that apply for special compensation. It's defined in 20636.1 C2 and 3 for the schools. And it's for Classic members, as it's defined as payments received for special skills, knowledge, abilities, work days, work assignments, or other work conditions. And it's limited to payments that are contained in a written labor policy or agreement. There are also statutory items that must be reported for your Classic members. Those include holiday pay, uniform allowance, and FLSA, or the Fair Labor Standards Act, overtime pay. All the payments must be available to an entire group or class, and it has to be paid for services rendered within normal working hours. Also, when it's reported to us, you have to identify the period in which it was earned. So only those payments that are affirmatively determined by the CalPERS board to be special compensation can be reported to the system for your classic members. These items are listed in the California Code of Regulations 571A, and within this list it's broken down into 5 separate categories. And these categories become important when you're reporting special compensation for your classic members, because in the very near future, we're going to require that any item of special compensation that is being reported must be identified with the category and type. This is currently a requirement for your PEPRA members and is going to carry over for classic, I'm going to say within the next 6 months. So the 5 categories include incentive pay, educational pay, premium pay, special assignment pay, and statutory pay. An example of an incentive pay category item would be longevity. That's a common one we see. Bilingual pay is another item of special compensation that we see common for schools. So once we identify that all the item or the item you wish to report is contained on the exclusive list in 571A, there are 9 criteria that must be met before it can be reported. So 1, it has to be on the list, and 2, it must meet all requirements in 571B. The first requirement is it must be contained in a written labor policy or agreement. These are most commonly your memorandums of understanding or MOU, but can take the form of any other document that stipulates the benefits of that particular group. And the MOU itself has, has requirements that it must meet for us to consider it compliant with our guidelines. And those requirements can be found in 571B1. You'll find the requirements for the MOU or written labor policy or agreement, and they're very similar to those of the publicly available pay schedules that you all are probably very familiar with. So some of the important ones, it has to be duly approved and adopted by your governing body or board. It must specify the conditions of payment. So if you're paying a particular item, we need to know the amount that is to be paid, whether that be a flat dollar amount or a percentage, and how often that payment is made to the employees. So the conditions of payment must be contained in this document. Also, it must be immediately accessible, whether that be within your office or on your websites. I highly encourage you to keep them housed on your websites, because that's the first place that CalPERS looks if we're conducting a review on one of your member accounts. We try to gather all the information we have prior to reaching out to you for information. So keeping it on your website is a great idea. So you must also keep the document for not less than 5 years. So if we do have to go back and inquire about some older pay, having those documents readily available is appreciated. So the other requirements, I mentioned there were 9. The next is available to an entire group or class. I mentioned that earlier. It must be performed during, or it must be part of normally required duties. Has to be performed during normal working hours. And there are a few more. Paid periodically as earned. So a good example of paying as earned, let's say off salary schedule pay. You may pay it on one particular day or within one pay period. However, that payment is actually earned over, let's say, the 14-15 school year. Therefore, the payment needs to be prorated out over that 14-15 school year, the period in which it was earned. Our system has the capability of using a retro special compensation adjustment if you're reporting a retro payment, where you can input the dates in which it was earned, and the system will automatically separate that payment equally over the months that you've indicated. So, for example, the 14-15 school year. However, if you're reporting a future payment, let's say the off-salary schedule payment is for the 15-16 school year, you can't utilize that date range functionality, and you would have to do that up front as you're reporting. Report equal payments for every pay period in which it was earned. So there's a few more requirements. It it cannot be solely in the final compensation period, so we don't want to see items pop up at the last minute as they're on their way out the door, which ties into not being final settlement pay, and that term is defined in 570 in the California Code of Regulations, and it cannot create an unfunded liability. So we're looking for consistency when you're reporting special compensation, just like when you're reporting pay rate. So again, special compensation is limited for classic members to those items contained in 571A that meet all requirements within 571B. So moving on to PEPRA, our new members. They have a term called pensionable compensation, and it's defined in 7522.34. And that statute provides a list of exclusions. And there were new regulations that were proposed, some of you may be aware of, but unfortunately they expired within the Department of Finance. They did not move on from that department. So currently we do not have any regulations to stipulate what items of special compensation are considered pensionable compensation. However, there was a circular letter released in December of 2012, I believe it is, circular letter number 200-062-12. Again, that's 200-062-12, and it gave a list of all the items that are reportable for your PEPRA members for special compensation purposes. So this list within the circular letter was derived by taking the new statute 7522.34 and applying that to the existing list for our classic members, 571A. So any items that did not meet the criteria or fell into an exclusion within the PEPRA statute were removed from the list. So there's some notable differences between what is reportable for classic and what is reportable for PEPRA members. And this was a request that came in through the forum. You asked for a list of the items that were excluded or what the differences are, rather than saying there are 99 for PEPRA and 105 for classic. Just give me the 6, right? It makes it a little bit easier. So here are the 6. Bonus was excluded. Uniform allowance is excluded. The value of employer-paid member contributions, or EPMC, is excluded. Off-salary scheduled payments are excluded for your PEPRA members. Management incentive pay and temporary upgrade pay are excluded. So if there are any changes or new regulations that become adopted, you will most certainly be made aware of the changes, most likely by way of circular letter. So all of the information that I went over today can be found on the CalPERS website. There's the Public Agencies and Schools Reference Guide out there to use and reference. You can also access the PEARL, or the California Public Employees Retirement Law, on the internet. And you can always contact the Compensation Review Unit where I work if you ever have any questions on what can and cannot be reported for special compensation purposes. You can reach us through the 888 number. A phone representative would be more than happy to try and answer your questions, but if it's too specific, they will most certainly route it to our area for response. Or if you have the contact information of your Compensation Review Analyst, feel free to utilize that information as well. We also have a direct fax number, 916-795-9372, if anyone cares to use a fax machine. And then we also have a general mailbox where you can email any MOU language that you have or proposed MOU language that you may have that you would like us to review prior to implementing or reporting the payment. And that's MOU_review@calpers.ca.gov. And I will be here if you have any questions, but I'll open it up for questions now if anyone has any.
What would be special assignment pay?
Special assignment pay, let's see, off the top of my head, can I think of one? So for police officers, and I know this probably isn't relative to schools, but for police officers, let's say canine pay would be reportable. If you pay them additional compensation for having a canine, that would be reportable. Mounted patrol pay would be something. So if they ride a horse to do patrol, that would be reported. Actually, there's a patrol pay as well. So all of the safety examples are coming to mind, but I did bring the PEARL with me today if you want to look over that. We can look over it, and if you have some items that you're curious about, we can most certainly go over them.
Because I actually wanted to see about getting like a difference between the temporary upgrade pay and like special assignment pay for schools. So, let's say that I have a payroll specialist that is out on a leave, and the payroll technician is going to cover some of those duties of a payroll specialist. And instead of moving her position from a technician to a specialist for 2 months, we are going to give her like additional 10% pay. And that situation, it's like over the years we call working out of class pay. And something like that, we were told that would not be special compensation unless we pulled that person, the technician, and said, okay, 4 hours a day, you're going to work as a technician, the other 4 hours and then split their pay 50-50 into those two positions. So that kind of work would not fall under special assignment pay?
Okay, for temporary upgrade pay, that type of special compensation, temporary upgrade pay, and you may recall that there was a circular letter sent out last year, the top 10 most common misreported items. And temporary upgrade pay was one of those items. And it kind of stipulated what we're looking for when we see temporary upgrade pay reported to us. So 1, the person must be assuming all duties in the higher classification. And 2, it has to be contained in your labor policy or agreement. So if you're saying that the person is taking on, in addition to their normal duties, the duties of the higher classification, we would render that overtime and not reportable to the system. So it would not qualify as temporary upgrade pay. So they should be assuming all the duties, whether that be for all hours worked or partial day, as in your second example, half and half, making sure they're assuming all the duties and having it contained in a written labor policy or agreement.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Anna, Riverside County. Going back to your example of the off-hour schedule payment, let's say for fiscal year 15-16, if a district agrees to an off-hour schedule payment, let's say in October, how do you report that? You were saying something about reporting throughout for the entire fiscal year. How will you report that if it's paid and agreed upon in October?
So if it's paid and agreed upon, you're not earning it on that particular day that it was agreed upon, right? There is a particular period that you're negotiating for. So we would actually look to you, we meaning CalPERS, would look to you to tell us what the earned period is. So if negotiations fell short and didn't get completed until October, you were negotiating for a specific period, whether that be the 14-15 fiscal year, 15-16 fiscal year. So we would look to you for the information, but we can try and guide you with the documentation that you have. So feel free to send over the documents you have, and we would be more than happy to give our input. I think Nina has a question.
Hi, Veena from Orange County. So if the agreement says that they will give, for example, a normal salary increase from July of 14 through now, for example, and there is a off-schedule one-time payment of 1% or whatever, isn't it that will be just listed for the date it's paid, like that month, when it's worded like that in the agreement?
The off salary?
Sorry, there is a one-time, there is 2 increases going on. Mm-hmm. One is regular salary from this to this date, and then there is off-salary schedule one-time payment of, let's say, 1%, regardless whether the person worked from what to what date. Wouldn't that be dated just for the month of, let's say, October only?
No, so the off-salary schedule pay, what we would do is prorate it over the correct earned period. So even if you do report it as a lump sum at the time of retirement, that payment is going to be prorated over the correct earned period. So as I said, if you're unsure of what the earned period is, we're going to ask you a few questions. First, we'll ask you for the documentation you have available to see if maybe we can interpret a date. And second, we'll ask some follow-up questions to see if there was a particular negotiation period and if it was being negotiated for a particular period of time. Because in essence, that payment wasn't earned on one single day. It was earned for a period of time. It was made for that entire year. So that's where we want to see the payment reflected.
You can only have one or the other reported because you cannot report both salary schedule increase as well as off salary at the same time.
So
because it's one or the other that can be reported. That's what my understanding is.
So for off-salary schedule payments, currently our interpretation of the definition of off-salary schedule pay is that it is in lieu of any increase to a salary schedule. However, there is a maximum of 6% that can be reported. So with that, if you have what you call an on-schedule increase, so a salary increase on the salary schedule, in conjunction with a special compensation of off-salary schedule pay, the combined total of those two, if they're over the same earned period, should not exceed 6%. Now, we've gotten several inquiries in about our interpretation of that particular special compensation items, and I can tell you it's currently under review by executive management to see if there is any change to our interpretation. But as of today, that is the stance that we're taking. So any pay increase and off-salary schedule payment for the exact same earn period cannot exceed a total of 6%. So if you gave a 6% on-salary increase and also gave a 1% off-salary schedule increase, the off-salary schedule would not be reported to CalPERS. In the same instance, if you have a 3% on-salary increase and a 3% off-salary increase, both of those should be reported to the system because the combined total is 6% or less.
Because I think it was a couple of, maybe last year, I was asking some guidance from PERS, and the way I was told it's in lieu of. So if you got salary increase and off schedule because it's in lieu of, you can only report one or the other. That was one thing. And secondly, I'm sorry taking so much time onto this one. The reason I'm clarifying this is because for the longest time there were no raises. And now there is multiple things going on,
right,
and the health benefits going on. So one of the districts, they gave a salary increase for, let's say, 14, 15 years. Mm-hmm. But then to compensate for the health benefits going on, they gave off schedule. They both are under 6 together.
Okay.
But the way I understood, you could only report one or the other. So we were not reporting off schedule.
Can I weigh in? So hi, my name is Michelle Balzaman. I think I've met some of you guys. Hi, Vina. I'm the section manager over Comp Review. And so to kind of explain what Lolita's, or kind of just elaborate on Lolita's explanation of off-salary. So Vina's right. There has been some interpretation differences in terms of off-salary schedule pay, whether it's in lieu of a pay rate increase or if it is up to the 6%. So administratively, we are implementing the up to the 6% like Lolita's indicated. But I can tell you that the conversations are taking place. We're pulling legislative history to determine what the legislative intent was when we developed these regulations. So this is going up to our executive team. We're doing legal concurrences to try to determine whether or not the administratively that we're applying it correctly. And so we will be in communication with you to maintain consistency. We just continue reporting the way that you are up to that 6%. And then we'll work with you as we work through it, as we get answers from our higher ups.
So right now, because that raise is in month of November, and salary increase is, let's say, 3-4%, and off is 1%, so we can report both.
Correct.
Yes. So up to that 6%.
You just kind of made me nervous when you said it was because of the health increase. So if it's a payment to make up for any health increases, it would not be reportable to the system.
No, actually, to my understanding, off salary schedule, when they calculate that amount, they just can have various reasons to calculate that amount. So in their mind, it's, even though it's health benefit or whatever reason they use, it's worded off salary schedule, and that's the word we look for. It says off salary schedule. It's not saying in lieu of health benefits. It's just we happen to know what they are doing.
Right. So, but when we tie it to health
La, la,
benefits,
la,
I
la.
think Vina, it creates a little bit more of of an issue in terms of compliance with comp review and our regulations. When anything's tied to in lieu of health benefits or any type of conversion in that sorts, we definitely look and dig a little bit deeper. If there is conversations that are taking place internally, or there's information that's being shared and CalPERS becomes privy to that, we would deny that, because although you're calling it off salary schedule, oftentimes when we dig deeper, what you're calling, apples may not really be apples as we dig deeper.
Because
and so
we only look for if it's saying off salary or salary increase.
right. And so and from our perspective administratively, when we review payroll that comes through, we don't take it on face value. Just because you're calling it off salary
Right.
schedule pay doesn't necessarily mean that it qualifies. And so what I recommend is if you guys have questions in regards to something particular or something that you're experiencing at your agency, I encourage you guys to reach out to us. We have our MOU review mailbox. We can dig deeper. We can ask the appropriate questions and help guide you through, administratively on your end so that you maintain compliance as well. And then we also just open up our conversations and we create good relationships.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions about reportable special compensation? We have another one over there.
Hi, Vicki Lewitt, Kern County Superintendent of Schools Office. So if we report these off-salary schedule payments as special comp and you want them for a date range, can we do one line with a date range, or do we have to do a line for every single month?
Going back to what I was explaining earlier, if you're reporting a retro payment, the system has the ability to accept the date range in which you want to report for, and it will break it out evenly for you. So there would be no reason to do the line by line. However, if you are doing it for future dates, so let's say some of it is for the past and some of it's for the future, you would have to do two separate transactions. Enter in the retro pay, figure out what those amounts would be, and the system can do it for you on the line by line for the retro. But if you have prospective that need to be reported, you'd have to report it every month in which it was reported or which it was earned.
Okay, but the special comp portion of it, we can do with one line over a date range.
So long
I'm
as it's a
asking.
retro.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'll be hanging around, so if you do come up with any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
So we're going to go ahead and take a break right now, a 20-minute break. We need to get our technical issues solved so that we can help those that are on the teleconference be able to communicate with us by the email box. So at this time, we'll go ahead and reconvene at in 20 minutes, 10:37, 10:35 or so. Thank you so much. Appreciate your patience.